It's better than nothing.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Squat Cobbler, episode 38. I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
And I am Mike at Official Pagan on everything.
And we're back to talk Alice Cooper. And this should prove to be an interesting conversation this week. We are talking about an album called Trash. And Mike and I were talking before the show. We're not 100% sure, but we're pretty confident that this is actually the highest selling Alice Cooper album of his entire catalog. Is that where we landed?
Yeah, it certainly appears that way. It has, 8 gold or platinum certifications from 8 different countries. So that's definitely more than any other, at least Alice Cooper solo release. And as far as I can tell, it's more than any of the Alice Cooper band as well. So it seems as if this would be the best-selling record.
It's an interesting record. What's your kind of like, if your headline in kind of assessing this album, how would you kind of summarize this album in a sentence or two?
This is a Desmond Child record featuring guest vocals by Alice Cooper.
I have nothing to add. I think that captures it. It captures it really well. So Desmond Child produced this album, has writing credits on every song but one. Every song but one on this album. And it is exactly what Mike said, which isn't bad. It is very much kind of, hi, I'm Alice Cooper, and I'm going to sing these songs for you. But there is no shared lineage of these songs to previous, or, we're going to see kind of a little bit more of the same when we get into Hey Stupid next. Fortunately, this is a brief detour. It's these two albums where this kind of happens. And it's weird because
I would say that even Hey Stupid does break a little bit away from this.
It's not a Desmond Child album. It is there becomes a little bit more of Alice in this, but
well, and just to give some context for people who don't know who Desmond Child is a songwriter and producer who did cleanup work or full-on songwriting and production for Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, Kiss, those sorts of acts. So that's what you're getting into with this.
Yeah, so you're going to get guitars. There's going to be a guitar dominant sound to it, but it's going to be a much more mainstream hair metal kind of guitar. You do recognize Alice's voice in it, but the one thing I was really struck in listening to this album is that one of the things that makes Alice Alice is that basically any album we've listened to varying degrees of success up till now, you could count on two things, either a sinister element to it or some humor. And this album is devoid of both of those.
100%. At no point do you feel like there's an edge to this, or that he could say or do anything, or not say or do anything in the sense that, while Alice Cooper's classified as shock rock, he never goes to the point where it's distasteful. It's always done in a clever way, which we've talked about at great length already, but you never knew what was going to come or what sort of topics he was going to tackle. And here he tackles all of maybe 2 topics and nothing particularly with any sort of edge. Although, as we've already said, it worked. This album got a great deal of radio play and it sold very well.
Yeah, because it's not poorly executed, but it's just really not Alice. So this is where I'm very conflicted on it, because this is not a bad album. This is a fairly enjoyable album. It's just doesn't have the things that make Alice the truly unique performer that he is. I would
even go as far as to say this is like my second favorite Desmond Child record.
What would your first one be?
He produced a Meatloaf album.
Okay, fair enough.
So, yeah, that's slightly above this, because if I remember correctly, and I'm not like a huge Meatloaf fan, but that record utilized a number of different songwriters, like Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, and different people contributed to that. So he wasn't like the primary songwriter for that. So there's a little bit more diversity, a little bit more edge to it. He was just a producer and co-writer on a bunch of the tracks.
There is likely some calculation here in terms of Alice performing. So he's kind of made his comeback. He went through the kind of dark years, forgotten albums. Those were not selling particularly well. The concerts were necessarily selling when he did concerts, which wasn't a lot during that time. Comes back with Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell. Constrictor did better in sales than a lot of the previous albums had done. The tours were doing pretty well as well. So he started to kind of pick up a little momentum. So kind of a comeback is occurring for Alice. And then I think he was looking to kind of really make sure the comeback was profitable and effective. And so this becomes a very mainstream delivery of things. And I come back to, I'm a big Captain Beefheart fan who never had albums that sold well ever. However, he tried to make a run about mid-career to say, what if I commercialized my sound? And he did 2 albums called Unconditionally Guaranteed and Blue Jeans and Moonbeams that, again, are like guest vocals by Captain Beefheart. These next 2, although I will agree with you, Hey Stupid to a lesser extent, these become more of a guest vocal kind of thing.
Oh, 100%. And the real difference, and this is something else that makes these 2 records stand out in Alice's entire catalog. We have heard backing vocals on a lot of stuff, not always to the best effect. And we've even heard a couple of duets where a couple of songs where artists from other bands have come in and played on stuff. This and Hey Stupid, one strong thread between these 2 that we don't see again, at least not to this degree on a studio record, feature a ton of guest artists.
Guest artists and profound use of additional vocals in the song become much more critical to the sound structure than we're used. Alice is typically very clearly the featured voice in it, and we'll roll right into a song that breaks that trend in a big way. And a song I actually do like quite a bit, Poison, which was Alice's first top 10 hit since You and Me, 1977, off of Lace and Whiskey. Soaring guitars, tremendous background vocals going on, great harmonies on it. Did really well, popular radio song. And I've always been quite impressed when done in concert because it's kind of hard to pull off the multiple vocals that are going on in Poison. But Alice live doing Poison is pretty true to this delivery. And I think this is a good song. Now, is it an Alice Cooper song? Probably not. But it's a good song, and so I enjoy it, and it's a great way to start off the album for me. But I'm interested in what you have to say, because I have a hunch maybe you're not as enthusiastic about this song as I am.
Very conflicted about this song, about this whole album in general, but particularly about this song. And just one other quick thing, we didn't touch on the cover artwork.
Oh, we need to do that.
We do need to do that. And just to follow up, we mentioned a bunch of guest artists. So I looked at the credits, not counting the people who are credited as solo band members. There are 15 guest artists from other bands on this album.
Yeah, and one that really brings it home for you a little bit later in the album that we'll look forward to talk to you.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, do you have anything before we get too far into Poison to say about the album cover?
So, not Alice Cooper songs, not Alice Cooper cover, because this is the hair metal version of Alice. It's leather jacket, kind of quasi-colorful T-shirt. Alice discovered the blow dryer and hair products for these next 2 albums, and his sometimes stringy mop and a little bit different look is a luxurious black mop of hair on Alice's head. It's a pretty cool T-shirt that he's wearing underneath a pretty cool leather jacket, but it is very much kind of that, I don't want to call it sex symbol, but it's more that kind of sexualized heavy metal singer kind of look to it. And it's Alice kind of looking down, hair covering his face on the cover.
Completely agree. This feels very much out of place in the Alice Cooper canon. He's not even looking at us. We get the Alice Cooper eye makeup through the T-shirt, which is actually kind of cool. So like if he looked more like him on the cover, that would actually kind of be a cool concept. But right off the bat, I feel like you know what you're walking into because he's got the bigger hair. He has the leather jacket, not biker leather, more like unironic gay bar leather.
Yeah, that's
one thing I do like about the cover though is I do like how they stylized his name and the album title together, which is something that carried over into there was like a live video of this tour and then carried over into Hey Stupid as well. I do like how they handled the logo.
I'd agree with that. I don't have anything else on this album cover, although again, it is the hair metal and not a biker jacket. It is a leather jacket. It's got a lot of stuff going on, but it looks a little bedazzled. And
when I see, did you ever see? And I absolutely love this movie. I know it was really controversial for the time, but it's a favorite of mine. Did you ever see the movie Cruising?
No, I did not.
So it's a movie with Al Pacino, and I don't want to give anything away for any of our listeners who haven't seen it. It's an extremely controversial movie, though, so it is hard to find. And he is a sort of like fresh on the force cop who is chosen because of his look to help find a serial killer who is targeting people who go to gay S&M clubs. And it really kind of delves a little bit into like S&M subculture at a time when that wasn't like, this is pre 50 Shades of Grey, where soccer moms are kind of, talking about S&M and stuff like that. Like this is something when it was actually really controversial to delve into some of that. But there's a lot of that like leather bar look in the movie. That's what I think of when I see Alice during this time.
The criterion I run here on this one is the kind of leather jacket evaluation method. Is would Freddie Mercury wear this leather jacket? Now, I will argue on the Trash album, that's a jacket that Freddie Mercury would wear. But if we go back to Alice and his leather jacket in Special Forces, that is not a Freddie Mercury jacket. So I think this is the distinction between kind of menacing leather jacket and less so.
Right. And the only band, and this is, again, maybe we're kind of talking around the album a little bit here. The only band that I really feel pulled off this sort of leather bar look at that time was Judas Priest.
Less ornate than this jacket, but yeah, they totally had the right, the vibe felt really, really right for Judas Priest.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Rob Halford, like he went more over the top with it in some of his later projects. He did a band called Two, and they had an album called Voyeurs, and that got a little bit of more like the leather bar S&M type thing. So he went further with it too, but it still worked. Like they've always managed to kind of pull that off. Whereas with this Alice Cooper, like it's almost like the way I would describe it, like this isn't his leather jacket. This is a fresh, brand new leather jacket they just put together for this photo shoot, if that makes sense.
And it's clearly a photo shoot picture.
Okay, so my thoughts on Poison.
Poison, yes. And now back to Poison. Yes. You're conflicted.
And now back to Poison. Very conflicted on this song. So my introduction to Alice Cooper was actually through my dad, as we've talked about before in a lot of his old records. He had all of the Alice Cooper group albums except for the first two. And then he had Welcome to My Nightmare. So that was when I was a little kid, like that was the Alice Cooper catalog. As far as I knew there was other stuff, but my world of Alice Cooper consisted of that. The next thing that I was exposed to was Poison. Being a huge hit and being all over the radio and being a kid, because this came out in 89?
Correct.
So I was born in 82. So being still a relatively young kid and hearing this on the radio, I had a really difficult time wrapping my head around this is the same Alice Cooper from Love It to Death and $1 Billion Babies. I didn't understand what selling out for radio play was at that age.
Yeah, because it's a departure. I mean, and there's not that there hasn't been huge kind of swings in the feel of Alice stuff, but you always kind of, while it might not have been exactly right, you always knew it was Alice in the previous ones. Even Lace and Whiskey and those, it was still Alice. And this is one again where it's just there's just not a lot of Alice Cooper in this beyond the vocals in this album. And you had mentioned, I loved it, the comment that Razor Fisted Yell is Constrictor without the fun. And I think there's, while again, this is not a bad album. The songs in this are not bad, but this is not fun. This is not the Alice Cooper fun that we're used to seeing in a lot of other stuff, for me.
No, this is very much, in my opinion, a Desmond Child product. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm not even knocking Desmond Child. I'm not saying he's a bad writer or a bad producer by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, re-listening to this today, this album is very well made. So I have nothing to really knock on the production side, but it's sanitized and radio ready to a degree that we haven't heard Alice. Even when it seemed like he was maybe trying with some of the ballads before, it's never sounded like this before. And Poison to me is so conflicting because that was like not only my introduction to different Alice from what my dad listened to. So like I had a similar thing with Black Sabbath. My dad was a big Black Sabbath guy, but only the Ozzy record. So the next Black Sabbath thing I got into on my own was the early Dio stuff, and I loved it. So my introduction to Alice outside of what I heard from my dad's old records was Poison, and it just was not for me. Now, where the conflict comes in at is, first off, I think the lyrics to the song are excellent. There's some great lines in this. Like, I want to hear you, I want to hurt you just to hear you screaming my name is a great line. There's a lot of great lyrics to this thing. And then the live version that appears later, and we've brought this album up so many times on Fistful of Alice, is excellent. It really gave me a completely different appreciation for this song.
It is so powerful live and enjoyable. The only song that I know of in Alice's canon that benefits more than Poison, and it's just slightly, is Woman of Mass Distraction in terms of live, where it's just all of a sudden it becomes almost a whole new song. Yeah, but it's powerful. Yeah, and the Fistful of Alice version's fantastic.
Yeah, hearing it live in general, and even when I would see him live and he would do it, It was just such a great, great song. And I love this song live, especially the Fistful of Alice version, because I hadn't seen Alice live in person prior to listening to Fistful of Alice. But that version in particular, that recording that's on that record, completely changes my perspective of this song, because the guitars in this on this whole record, and you had mentioned something before we came on where there's going to be some repetitive stuff from song to song. The guitars on this entire record for me are so sanitized to the point where there's just no edge and no crunch to them left whatsoever. And when all of that comes back on the live record, you really get what this song is and what it could have been.
Yeah, because there's more edge live, and it's better. This is close to the best song on the album. The challenge I have is everything else just kind of clumps together, that they're not a whole lot different. There's not a whole lot of uniqueness to everything else that comes out. Topic matter kind of doesn't differ a whole lot. Each individual songs with their different kind of hooks, but they don't distinguish themselves much at all. So it's just this kind of, there's a lot of sameness in this album for me.
Oh yeah, I definitely get the feeling, and it's funny because I did read when I was doing a little bit of research for this one that there's a bunch of leftover tracks from this album, a lot of which have still not been released because Alice wasn't happy with them. Like, it almost sounds like when I listened, because especially re-listening to it this morning, because this is an album that I really don't revisit that much, and if I do, it's like just a couple of songs. Listening to it all back to back, even in the moment, it starts to run together, and it's almost like I feel like they went in, did Poison, and they were just like, this song is going to be a huge hit. Let's just do 9 more of these.
Yeah, because it becomes variants on the theme. And I mean, obviously, Poison was the hammer. This is kind of clearly built for radio. It's hooky. It's great. I was less aware, again, prepping for the show, less aware of the unreleased stuff, but did find out. And some of the songs that we're not going to talk about that were candidates included Low Class Reunion, The Ballad of Alice Cooper, Bad Angel, Good Girl Gone Bad, and Agritat. And it's interesting because this album has them, and then when we get to Hey Stupid also has a kind of a comparably long list of songs that did not make it on there that you're not even seeing show up on box sets.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because there is, a few Alice box sets with B-sides and unreleased material and all that kind of stuff on it, and a bunch of these songs are still not available anywhere.
Yep. So want to move on?
Sure.
So Spark in the Dark, I don't have a lot to say about Spark in the Dark because the sound continues in Spark in the Dark. It's highly repetitive. It's not a bad song. It's well executed, but there's not a whole lot memorable for me about Spark in the Dark.
No, from this point on in the album, we get a lot of tracks that exist in the same world as Poison. Same themes, same overall sound. They just don't click the same way, quite the same way that Poison does. Like, it's almost Poison.
So we have a spark, and the spark, of course, leads to a fire. So House of Fire is the
I didn't even put that together. That's an awesome catch. I didn't put that together. I will say really quick about Spark in the Dark, though, before we move on to Fire. There is a little bit more snarl in the vocals on this one. A little bit.
Yep. Yeah. And that shows up in a few places, and those become, those are pretty good moments when the snarl's there. Spark in the Dark, there is a little bit of that. It's not, when you go into House of Fire, there's not a snarl. There's this kind of, let's build a house of fire, baby. I don't know what it is. There's a slight menace. I don't know exactly. It's not a snarl, but what I was also unaware of is that House of Fire, which is not a bad song, Joan Jett shares a writing credit along with Desmond Child and Alice Cooper on this one, which I had just totally missed until getting ready for the show. And re-listening to House of Fire.
I knew that she co-wrote a song on here. I didn't know it was House of Fire, though.
It makes sense to me because it's got, and I don't mind Joan Jett. The things that kind of make Joan Jett up are the things that kind of show up in a lot of these songs here that, again, just don't translate. If you become a fan of Alice Cooper, those are reasonable things, and they're good ways to construct songs, and they're good ways to do lyrics and hooks and choruses, but it's just not been the deal with Alice. And so House of Fire, and it starts off with the kind of multiple voice chorus of House of Fire shout out kind of from the group, which is something you've never heard on an Alice album before. You hear on tons of hair metal band stuff. Upon reflection, now that I know that Joan Jett was a part of it, I can see her influence on this song. It's not a bad song, and I mean, this is basically what I'm going to go through this entire album going, is like, it's not a bad song. I'm just not really in love with it.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about most of these tracks as well. Are you a Joan Jett guy? I know you said not too much, but are you a fan at all?
I like her. I kind of like the attitude and the delivery. I've not really sought out a bunch of her stuff. I was like, oh, here's my Joan Jett catalog sitting here at home. But anytime I hear stuff, I like it and enjoy it. I find her a good artist for me. Where does Mike fall on Joan Jett? That sounds
Overall,
bad. Don't fall on Joan Jett.
Overall, I would say I'm a Joan Jett fan. Not like a huge fan. I don't, rush out to get all of her stuff when it comes out. I don't. But overall, I like her stuff. I had a great Joan Jett banner for a while when her Fetish album came out, of her with like a leather and chain leash on. That was awesome to have as a teenage boy in your bedroom.
Absolutely.
The song Fetish is an awesome song. The Joan Jett song Fetish. If you guys have never heard it, I recommend that way more than House of Fire.
I'm going to keep moving. That's okay with you. And I'm not going to, I have very little say about Why Trust You, which is, so if I said for most of the songs, I go, it's a good song, but I'm not really in love with it. Why Trust You, I don't even think is that great a song. And I don't love it. It's again, repetitive and not a lot of point to this song to me. Again, nothing grating about it, but just a very kind of a vanilla delivery of the hair metal, big rock kind of feel.
This song to me is so generic in that world. I literally listened to this album hours ago and can't remember anything from this song.
Yeah, there's not much to it. So this will be, we probably need to set some time aside because I do know prior to the show that this is actually this is going to be probably number one on Mike's playlist. The next song, which is Only My Heart's Talkin'. This is the only track on this album that Desmond Child does not share a writing credit for. Bruce Roberts and Andy Goldmark join Alice on this one. So Alice did the lyrics for all these, which are totally not Alice lyrics, but Only My Heart is Talkin', which is so more of a Bon Jovi-esque quasi-rock ballad, joined by a special guest vocalist, Steven Tyler. I'm going to let you lead off on Only My Heart is Talkin' because I just know it has such a special place in your heart, Mike. Why don't you share with the folks your thoughts on Only My Heart's Talkin'?
Man, I hate this song. I never thought I would utter these words, but I really wish they'd had Desmond Child do a pass on this thing. This is bad. It's a shameful attempt at selling out. It's really disappointing because it's so generic and so forgettable. Even among these sort of twangy, it's not even a power ballad. This is very much like what I call the Poison ballad. Poison would do ballads. They weren't quite the power ballads that Aerosmith had really made an art form, which is ironic because Steven Tyler's on this. Those big chorus arena rock songs that Aerosmith had really pioneered and so many other bands like Bon Jovi took and ran with. This is more the Poison, the band Poison, not the song Poison. This is more a ballad in the terms of the band Poison, who would do like a little bit of a country kind of element to it where it was a little bit like almost a twangy undercurrent to their ballads. And yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And you have Steven Tyler on it, who, again, Desmond Child was a major songwriter for Aerosmith. So you have Desmond Child artist, you have a Desmond Child co-written and produced record, and yet this is the one thing which Desmond Child would have knocked out of the park, the power ballad on here. And this is the song he's not on.
And you can tell, you can tell big time.
It just makes no sense. Like, this is the guy behind the power ballads of the era, Aerosmith and Bon Jovi and all that kind of stuff. And this is the song he's not on.
Yeah, and of it, so far it's been Poison, so a song I like a lot, multiple ones of the rest. House of Fire I like, pretty indifferent to most of the other ones. This becomes the first song that I actually do dislike, and again, it's just simply because it doesn't add value to the album, and it does seem very... No,
I would say it detracts from the album. You could actually cut this, make it a 9-song album, and I think it would be stronger.
Yeah.
And there's few times in the Alice, and this is an amazing thing to say, in such a massive catalog and massive body of work, there are a few times I can honestly say that, and this is one of them.
And isn't it ironic that you've got Alice and Steven Tyler, and you get something that is just blah, and then a while back you had Alice and Donovan, a highly unlikely candidate to sing a song with Alice, that ends up delivering a classic song. Comes again to the quality of the song more than anything else. But I mean, the light years of difference between Billion Dollar Babies and Only My Heart at Talkin'. And then you look at who the kind of co-singer was on it. Pretty amazing. Tells you a lot about Only My Heart at Talkin'. Not so good.
No, this is not a good song. And luckily, I mean, I feel like Alice, after this, did continue to do some duets and have some guest singers to a way better effect, working with people like Rob Zombie, working with Guns N' Roses and stuff like that to much, much better effect than this. So luckily, like, it didn't stop Alice. But like, this is a situation where, and this isn't a particularly long record, it's only like around 40 minutes, I think, but you could cut this and the record would actually be stronger.
I would vote for that. So we move to side 2. Bed of Nails kicks it off. Other interesting thing here is Kane Roberts rejoins us. So Kane, who's been very active with Alice over the last 2 albums, does make an appearance here. And you could tell it, because to me, in terms of if there is any edge, and it might be generous to say that there's any edge on a song in Poison, the edge is in Bed of Nails. And even though topic matter, again, kind of non-traditional Alice topic matter throughout this whole album, but when you got Alice singing "Drive You Like a Hammer on a Bed of Nails" with ferocity, pretty cool. And so I do like Bed of Nails.
Yeah, I really don't mind this song. You hit on it already a couple of times, and it does need to be said. This is like a 80s hair rock sexualization of Alice Cooper, which sounds weird because it's not like an overly sexualized record in the sense that these are like, trying to think of another band of that era, Faster Pussycat, for example. This isn't like that, but this is definitely, and Alice has themes before them his way, and in a way that made sense with his voice and his kind of vision for this. This is Alice singing Desmond Child's, and while I do think this is one of the stronger songs on the record, we're back to like this none of this is making the playlist for me.
Yep, I'm with you. And speaking of This Maniac in Love with You is next, which is pretty cool title. And you think, okay, maybe we're going to get into a little more, but it's just those words across the same kind of structure and nature as some of the past songs. Again, nothing really remarkably notable about this song for me.
Yeah, no, there's nothing that really super stands out. And again, this is where this album falters really for me. If you can put past this sort of overly clean production and the fact that this in a lot of ways doesn't even feel like an Alice record, you could look past all of that if it wasn't for the fact, and I think this is true of everyone and especially true of Alice Cooper, it's almost worse to say that a song is forgettable or that something doesn't evoke much of a response from you than it is to say that it's a bad song, especially for somebody who's a showman like Alice Cooper. And that's where this album for me really falters. It's not that it's bad, with the exception of Only My Heart Talkin'. It's not that these are bad songs. It's just the standard that we want as real Alice Cooper fans. And again, though, you could easily make the argument that Kelly and I are wrong because this record was hugely successful.
I think, but it was successful because the people that bought it weren't Alice Cooper fans. The people that bought it were Poison fans, not the song, the band. They were Desmond Child fans. And there's nothing wrong with being a Desmond Child fan or Poison fan. But if you've kind of become a fan of Alice Cooper because of what he does and the nature of his work, this is not it. And if there aren't a lot of hair metal bands that I'm a big fan of, and these are Alice singing hair metal songs that are good songs in that genre. It's just not a genre I have a lot of passion about. And where's the fun? Where's the sinister and all that? It's just it's very kind of standard fare. But it did do incredibly well. Again, there's no criticism of the quality of the music on here. It's just for those of us who signed up to be Alice fans, there's a different expectation of what's on the menu than what's on the menu on this album.
Yeah, and you really hit it. And it's interesting because I think that there was a lot of this going on at that time, where I think there was records that maybe not as extreme as this, because this is an entire album done in that style, but I think there were a lot of bands who were doing stuff that was from now on called the Desmond Child vein. There's a lot of people doing stuff in that vein just to sell records, and then when you buy the record, though, the rest of the content on there didn't match that song, like the big radio single. A great example, and I think I already mentioned them on this episode, is Faster Pussycat. They refer to themselves, I've seen before and in conversations with them, as porn metal, and they kind of came out of this same era of music, and it was because they were in the decline of Western civilization too, which Alice was also in. And off of that, they decided to do a springboard into radio and do a radio song called House of Pain, which does not in any way sound like anything else on that record. And there's a lot of bands that you could point to at this time who would do a Desmond Child style song on the record just to sell records. And a lot of people would buy those albums who wouldn't otherwise be a fan of that band. This is a more extreme version of that to me because this is an entire record like that. So you really hit the nail on the head for me when you said that a lot of people bought this, but they weren't Alice Cooper fans.
Yeah, and if the objective was to sell albums, I mean, this was configured well to do that, and again, well executed. And Alice has got a great rock voice, and so putting it to bear on these things, it makes the songs good. But it's of a certain genre. It is a very appealing genre to a lot of folks, and so I'm not knocking it. It's just for me not on my short list in terms of, boy, this is the kind of music I want to listen to. We move into Trash, title track. You would kind of hope that the title track would stand out in some way and kind of carry you into new territory and all of that. But more of the same for me.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing here. It's our first of 2 Bon Jovi related tracks on this, other than the fact that Desmond Child has his stamp all over this. 2 direct Bon Jovi related tracks.
This one could clearly be on a Bon Jovi album, as could the next song, Hell. So definitely Hell Is Living Without You is apparently a Bon Jovi song escaped from the Bon Jovi album corral and made its way over to Trash and showed up as Hell Is Living Without You. Bon Jovi shares a writing credit on this along with Richie Sambora, Alice, and Desmond Child, of course. Again, a hard one for me to remember a lot about. More Bon Jovi than Alice Cooper. And so if you want to say, gee, I wonder what it would sound like to have a Bon Jovi song sung by Alice Cooper, Hell Is Living Without You will accomplish that for you. I'm just not, it doesn't get me much. But if for some other folks it does, good for them.
Yeah, these both really feel like Bon Jovi songs because Trash has some backing vocals from Bon Jovi, and this one you got the co-written by Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora, and Richie Sambora also plays guitar on this one. Can't get much more Bon Jovi than that. I'm not a Bon Jovi guy. You?
No, not at all. Again, not that I think he's bad. It's just not my thing.
Yeah, when it comes to stuff like Bon Jovi, like I'm not saying that Bon Jovi's a bad band or a talentless band. What I always say when it comes to certain bands like that, like I'm not the target audience for that. And that's really how I feel about this album. Like even as an Alice Cooper fan, I'm not the target audience of this album.
Yeah, I think this album was written for a mass market and configured for mass market in terms of the people that you see playing on it, how it was constructed, the heavy Desmond Child influence throughout it. And, mission accomplished in terms of, again, Alice's best-selling album. Poison, one of his biggest singles ever. It achieved the objective, but I don't think it was, let me reach out to my fans that have come to know and love me for kind of what I'm about. There's nothing wrong with. It's just, as we, what we're doing here is we're ranking these albums in terms of what we kind of feel about them, and commercial efforts probably not going to fare particularly well on our lists, but we'll see. It wraps up at the end with I'm Your Gun. Edgy-ish. There's a little bit. It's still more of the same again. And this is the thing throughout the whole process is that we absolutely know Alice Cooper can write incredibly clever lyrics. And there are not incredibly clever lyrics. There are hook lyrics. There are repetitive lyrics. There are chant lyrics. There are sing this as a big group lyrics. But I'm Your Gun's a great example of it, where you're just getting barraged with I'm Your Gun, gun, gun a lot. Alice can do so much more. This is not a song I dislike, but not one I'd have on anywhere close to a playlist.
Same thing here. I pretty much agree with everything you said. There's a little bit more edge to this than the Bon Jovi 2 songs that came before it, which is ironic because Kip Winger is on this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix across this whole album. And we're going to see some more interesting mixes kind of coming up next album as well.
Yeah, Hey Stupid is a continuation of a theme. And I guess this is sort of an interesting tie-in. So to me, Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell are obviously linked. Like there are certain themes that carry over into both of them, certain stylistic choices that carry over into both of them. And you see that again with Trash and Hey Stupid. With Hey Stupid's a little bit of a different record in the same way that Raise Your Fist and Yell is a little bit of a different record than Constrictor. But Hey Stupid has a very similar sound again. tons of guest artists from bands who were popular at the time again. So it's a lot of a continuation, but again, they do make some changes, and it's sort of like there's a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like a boilerplate that carried over to the next record. And they did the same thing with Constrictor to Raise Your Fist and Yell, just with way diminished returns on Raise Your Fist and Yell.
Yeah, and we're only going to get that one more time in the current catalog, in my opinion. And that's so the other kind of pairing that you see. So I totally agree that, you've got this kind of pairing between Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell where the returns diminished. I'd argue this next pairing of Trash and Hey Stupid, it doesn't diminish. I mean, we don't break a whole lot of new ground, but you start to see some things start to happen on Hey Stupid that pull it out of being a Desmond Child cover record. And so there's some interesting things there. But then down the road here, we'll get to it. Brutal Planet and Dragon Town is probably, I think, the last occurrence of where you've got kind of two Alice albums in a row that have a lot of connectivity.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right.
I would also say out of the pairings, it'll be interesting to see. We should go back after we finish Dragontown, take these three pairings of records and see which duo you think is the best.
I think I know the answer to that, but we'll wait till we get through all of them to confirm. But I think we definitely need to revisit that once we finish with Dragontown. Okay, so let's move on into this. Will be interesting. So, what tune off of Trash would we give Mr. Pat Boone?
Oh, without question, it's Only My Heart Talkin'.
Yep, I got to go with that too.
And he would go full on country ballad.
An even more painful listen than this version is, and he probably brings Steven Tyler along again anyway.
Right, because Steven Tyler is a country singer now.
You ready to rate this bad boy?
Yeah, this one's gonna be tough for me. So. And we kind of got into this a little bit before we came on. So for me, the reason, and probably a lot of people are curious about this if you're looking at our lists probably, it seems like I'm keeping Alice Cooper Goes to Hell low, like hovering just above the Dark 2 that we dare not speak of, the Voldemort records. Yep. And it's because Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, to me, rock record anymore. And that's kind of how I feel about this. Like this is more or less along the same lines as that record in my mind, because my biggest complaint with it is it doesn't feel like an Alice Cooper record. It doesn't even feel like a hard rock record. This is definitely a more consistently rock oriented record and an Alice record. So one thing it does edge out over Goes to Hell though is it does have Poison, which proved to be a huge hit for Alice. And particularly in the live versions, I do think is a good song. So I think I'm going to put this right above Goes to Hell and right below Raise Your Fist and Yell.
So you're putting Raise Your Fist and Yell above this.
Yes.
All right. No, but I think you're in the right park. It's tough because I'm in that same neighborhood for it. So that puts him. That will be number 15 on your list. This is the 18th Alice Cooper album, and this is coming in as now 15. For Mike.
Yes.
So it's going to do a little bit worse for me. Actually, will it do worse for me? No. It'll end up actually in the same place because of just some other ranking things that went on. It will also end up 15th on my list. However, that will put it between Lace and Whiskey and Easy Action. So I'm actually just putting it above that boilerplate bulkhead of Easy Action, which now for me is a bulkhead of 3. I've got Easy Action, Raise Your Fist and Yell, and Pretties for You. But we're both putting it at 15. It's going to be interesting to see where Hey Stupid lands. And again, struggle on this because this is not a bad album. It's just not an Alice album. So
yeah, and that's really honestly like if this was more Alice, if these songs played more like they do live, this would be ranking a lot higher for me.
You make a good point on Poison. That helps elevate it a little bit. But it's just, if I want to enjoy Alice Cooper, this is not the album I'm checking into. Not that it's bad, but it's just not. It doesn't have the little goodies that I love to have on an Alice Cooper album, where it's something sinister, something funny, clever lyrics, goofiness. This is a different deal for this one. And that's Trash, ladies and gentlemen. Next up for us will be Alice's 19th album, Hey Stupid. And we will talk about that in a couple of weeks. Super excited that we've been putting these conversations out, as always, on our blog and on iTunes and all of that. But we've been also putting them out on YouTube. And it's been very exciting to see that there's a decent number of people who are checking in on them, and some of the folks are commenting and interacting, and so it's great to see some folks at least interested in the content. So we really appreciate it. I don't have anything else to add for this week. Mike, do you?
No, that's it. Just thank you everybody for listening.